Prop guy.
My grandma Ella Clark is listed as an inmate at the Bremwood Orphanage in Waverly in the 1920 U.S. Census. The orphanage was home to over 50 children that were labeled inmates. The term inmate startled me at first until I found out that in the early 1900s it was the name given to all children living in institutions such as orphanages. This is a picture of the Bremwood Lutheran Orphanage in the 1920s. One of my questions is, why did my grandma Ella's mom and dad, who were still living, put Ella and her little brother in the orphanage while keeping 3 of their other children at home? I have no one to ask, and I'd really like to know. Here's a postcard that says on the back that it is a girls' class at the Waverly Orphanage. My grandma's class probably looked very similar to this class. This is just an enlarged picture of that postcard. I decided during my journey for answers about my grandma to research the other 50 inmates who lived, laughed, and ate with Grandma Ella. The children ranged in age from 2 to 18, and each has a story to tell. I will introduce you to these orphans and what happened to them after they left the orphanage. Some lived ordinary lives, and some not so ordinary, and some everywhere in between. Some of the information will be graphic and deal with death, suicides, and accidents. Some of the stories are just plain sad, and some are inspirational. My name is Lynette Hartman. I am not a professional genealogist. I am simply an amateur who is very interested in family history. This is my husband, Russell, who's helping me.
Hello.
And he's happy that I'm doing the video so he doesn't have to hear all about everybody all the time. I love looking up old records and seeing things like people's handwriting and the papers they used, and papers like this. This is from 1913, and it is a booklet from the 50-year celebration of Bremwood Orphanage. Did you show the cover?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I was going to
Okay.
do that.
There's some pictures that are in the booklet.
And it's like this.
So let's get started. Grandma Ella entered the orphanage at the age of 7 with her brother Augie, age 5. Ella stayed there until she was 18 when she moved to Waterloo, Iowa. Her brother was there until he was of age. This is a record from the orphanage about the 2 of them. As you can see, it does not contain much information. From stories from my mom, my grandma really loved living in the orphanage. She felt that she was part of this large family. She became what I call fiercely Lutheran. She had been baptized in Sumner, Iowa, in the Lutheran church by her biological parents. This is the church record of her baptism in 1906 at St. John's in Sumner. The next one. And then on this next one, when I enlarged it, you can see her baptismal name was Georgia Ella Frederica Clark. Bremwood was ran by the ELCA Lutheran Church, and Ella would have attended St. Paul's ELCA Lutheran Church in Waverly during all her years at the orphanage. Her dream was that all her kids and kinfolk would always belong to this particular church. The church had become her family and also the source of her deep Christian faith. Her Bible was falling apart from wear and tear when she passed away. She had read it constantly. After she left the orphanage and moved to Waterloo, she got a job at Rath Packing Company where she met Paul White. They were married and had 2 children, one of whom was my mom. And this is a picture of my mom and Grandma Ella. And then the next picture this is a picture of my mom in the middle, my Grandma Ella, and Grandma Ella's sister. We'll talk about her later. Ella divorced her first husband, and then later she married Leslie Thomas. They had no children. She died at the age of 48 when my mom would have been 17. Mom would have graduated from high school and was living and working in Waterloo at the time. Ella had been having heart problems, and her doctor back in the 1940s had told her she needed to leave the big city of Waterloo and go live in the country. So she moved to Fayette. Unfortunately, her heart gave out and she passed away on December 6, 1954. Here is her death certificate. You can see the cause of death listed as myocardial coronary occlusion for 15 minutes and arteriosclerotic heart disease for 5 years. Although her physical heart was weak, her compassionate heart was full of love for her Savior, love for her children, love for her many family members, and love for her church family. Her legacy is one of great faith and great love. She was a wonderful person. And that is how I'm going to begin to tell you about my grandma, who entered the orphanage, not being an orphan, and she was not alone, but with her little brother, Augie. I will begin every one of my videos with some information about Ella and Augie and pictures of them. Many of the children were not orphans. For some reason, they were sent to the orphanage, perhaps because their parents could not provide them with food, warmth, or proper care. So what became of these fellow inmates from Bremwood? Let's start with the Brunstein family. The Brunstein family, who had 4 boys, who would become Grandma Ella's fellow inmates in 1920. This is their mother and father. This is Johanna and William Brunstein's wedding picture on January 28, 1899. She was 22 and he was 19. This is the record of their marriage in 1899. I find it curious that's typed, so it could have been copied. Between 1899 and 1908, Johanna had 4 sons. Then in 1910, Johanna Brunstein died in childbirth to a baby boy named Henry, who only lived less than half a year. This is a picture of her gravestone. Their father, William F. Brunstein Sr., felt he was unable to care for them adequately and surrendered his 4 sons to the orphanage when they were approximately 7, 9, 10, and 13 years old. This list shows the parents and then the 5 sons in the order of their death year. So we have, can you hold it back just a little bit? So we have Henry Brunstein, who's the baby boy that was born when the mom died. And then the next fella is Martin Brunstein. And I'm going to talk about Martin today. He was 15 years old in 1920. I'm not really sure what year Martin left the orphanage. Unfortunately, not long after, on December 3rd, 1923, he was sentenced to 2 years for poultry larceny, which is probably a fancy way of saying a chicken thief. He entered the Anamosa, Iowa Penitentiary on December 4th, 1923. In a freak accident, he accidentally drowned while working at one of the state prison farms on Buffalo Creek. This is a map showing where farm number 1 was at. I'm going to show Buffalo Creek. Do you see? Oh, Buffalo Creek. And then Anamosa is down here. Here's what the Anamosa paper, the Eureka, had to say about the incident. Drowned at prison farm in Buffalo River at State Farm Number 1 last Tuesday morning. He went into a deep hole while trying to recover a pail, sank from sight, and died apparently without a struggle. Bernstein was employed with 5 other men under the direction of gardener George Seeley, dipping water from the river into barrels. The water was being hauled to water the truck patches. The men were working just below the stone bridge which leads to the farm. Bernstein was standing on a rock when he slipped. The pail he was using fell from his grasp and bobbed over the small waterfall near at hand. He recovered this pail and responded to the cry of a companion, made a plunge to get another one which had fallen into the swift current. He evidently lost his balance and plunged over the falls into a deep hole. As he sank, several of his companions, all good swimmers, plunged in after him, but he did not come up, and they were unable to rescue him. Sheriff Bonhoeffer was notified at once. Soon active work of trying to recover the body was in progress. An iron hay rake was dragged through the deep hole, and thus the body of Bernstein was brought to the bank an hour after he disappeared. He was about 20 years old and had served 6 months of an 18-month sentence. This is his death certificate. Now,
Messed it up?
It's okay. Now, when Martin Bernstein was sentenced for chicken larceny in 23 and admitted to the Anamosa State Prison, he was not alone. Oh, you got the wrong papers. Shoot. Just one moment, these. There you go. He was not alone. He was joined by his co-defendant, Earl Parker. This is an enlarged Anamosa this is the consecutive register from Anamosa, and it is enlarged, but it's still pretty hard to see. But it does say that Earl Parker was able to finish his 2-year sentence and released from prison on November 23rd. Unfortunately, his criminal record did not stop there. He was again a prisoner at Anamosa for larceny, and after serving his time was released November of 36. Then in April of 37, he served time in Illinois at the Pontiac Correctional Center for poultry larceny. Then came April of 1938. Here's the newspaper article from the Green Recorder in Butler County. I thought it was pretty interesting. Poultry thief is held at Allison. Earl Parker, taken into custody at Cedar Rapids Thursday, is a former convict. Earl Parker, 40 years of age, was apprehended at Cedar Rapids by the police of that city Thursday. Friday, Sheriff Frank Neal and County Attorney Harvey Carter and Oscar Hauserman of the Waterloo Police Force returned Parker to Butler County. Parker served 2 sentences in Anamosa and 1 sentence at Pontiac, Illinois, and along with Elmer Erdman and Evelyn Lehman, both of Waterloo, will be charged with the larceny of poultry. You could say that Earl Parker was a career poultry thief who lived a life of crime. Now we go to January of 1949, where we find Earl being taken to the isolation hospital from the detention center in Waterloo. He subsequently died on March 21st, 1949, of an extremely painful disease called urosepsis. He had a urinary tract infection that went septic. This is his death certificate. He was buried in the Pauper's Field in Waterloo, having had no family members to bury him, and his grave is unmarked. A very sad end to his life at the age of 48, but at least he did live longer than his 1923 fellow poultry thief, Martin Brunstein, who died at age 20. Okay. Our next Brunstein is William Jr. William Jr. was the same age as my Uncle Augie in 1920, and that would have been 12 years old. It seems William led a pretty normal life. After leaving the orphanage, he moved to Denver, where he got a job and found a wife. Years later, though, they had moved to Waterloo, and they started having marital trouble, which ended very badly. They were the victims of a murder-suicide. William shot and killed his wife, and then he shot and killed himself. Here is how the Waterloo Courier reported the incident. William Brunstein and wife, victims in tragedy near Gates Park. Police Thursday were probing the private lives of William Brunstein, 35, and his wife Elnora, 32, in an attempt to learn a motive for the death of the couple and what they believed to be a case of murder and suicide. The bodies of the Brunsteins were found at 12:25 a.m. Thursday in an automobile parked at the side of Hoover Road in Gates Park, about 1 block east of the north end of North Barclay Street. Mrs. Brunstein had been shot through the left ear and her husband through the head just above the right ear. A .38 caliber automatic pistol was found in Brunstein's right hand, and a note written on the back of a restaurant check was found on the windshield. The 6-word note named a Waterloo man, saying he is responsible for this. Dr. Winder, deputy county coroner, who was cooperating with police in the investigation, had not called an inquest by noon Thursday, and it was believed that no inquest would be held unless the need is indicated by new information. An empty shell case from the pistol was found in Mrs. Brunstein's lap, and a second case was found in the rear compartment of the 1930 sedan in which the bodies were found. From this evidence, the location of the head wounds in the two bodies and the powder burns that indicated both shots were fired at close range, police chief and chief of detectives concluded that Brunstein had first shot his wife and then taken his own life. As Brunstein, seated behind the wheel, shot into his wife's head, the empty case from the automatic pistol, which ejects empty shells on the right side, would have been tossed into the rear seat where it was found. Police then concluded that Brunstein had turned the gun on himself, and the empty shell was either ejected directly into his wife's lap or struck the windshield and glanced into the position where it was found. However, police were unwilling to close the case until they had investigated the connection that the Waterloo man named in the note had with the family. They also were attempting to learn how Brunstein received a deep gash on the top of his head about 1 inch long. This wound, apparently inflicted only a short time before his death, was not discovered until late Thursday morning. Brunstein also had 5 or 6 shallow perforations of the skin above the right eye that appeared to have been inflicted by the teeth of a comb. Police found $500 and 25 bills of $20 denominations in a bank wrapper in Brunstein's pocket. Brunstein had been employed on the day shift at Chamberlain Corporation and worked Monday and Tuesday of this week. He was not at work Wednesday. Mrs. Brunstein had been employed since last February. The family had lived on Logan Avenue until about 6 months ago when they moved to an apartment. The bodies are at the funeral home, and Police Chief Harry Krieg, however, requested Thursday morning that the bodies be held here until the police investigation is completed. Double funeral services are being planned for William Brunstein, 35, and his wife, Elnora, 32, who were found dead Thursday morning in a car parked near Yates Park. The deputy coroner said Friday there would be no inquest. He said he agreed with the murder-suicide theory of the police and termed the case closed. He said that questioning of friends of Mr. and Mrs. Brunstein substantiated belief that marital difficulties led to the shooting. The bodies were buried side by side in the same lot in the cemetery. Both will be at the Matthias Funeral Home until the time of services, but the public will not be admitted. Now you can put that down. Okay. I look forward to bringing you the next video when we will discuss the rest of the Brunstein brothers who fared much better than Martin and William after leaving the orphanage. And also I'll talk about my Grandma Ella and the other orphans. Goodbye and thank you for watching.